Welcome back to the Code Ryan podcast. Today, Lucas joins me and we're going to discuss some kind of TypeScript related things, as well as maybe get into the Node.js test runner a little bit that Lucas has been a part of. But before we get to that, Lucas, could you maybe just give me a little bit of a rundown on kind of what your tech journey or tech story has kind of looked like so far?
Hey, Ryan. So thanks for inviting me. First, I've been coding since, 2010 professionally, 2011, I think. So it's been around 13 years now. But I started coding a bit further, back like 2009 or something. I'm 29, so I was, 14, 10, something like this when I started. And I'm terrible at math, so probably I'm wrong on this. But I first started as just like a curious boy, just like doing something, and usually in games. Back in Brazil, I'm from Brazil. We had like this online game that's called Ragnarok Online. They had like a bunch of stuff, and one of those things is they had like this bots for the game, and they were made in Perl. And the first, contact with programming, real programming, because I have done like bash scripts and stuff before, but the first contact with like real programming was with those macros from this game, way back in the day. And later on, I just like gave up on this and started actually having like a formal study on informatics and programming and everything. So I had a technical school, and that's where basically I learned most of the things that I use as a base today. But then I started working on smaller companies like consultancies and stuff like this until I reached out to some. I worked at one of the like not big, but medium-sized consultancies back then, like 2014 something, up until 2016, and actually a bit more, I think. And then I moved on to startups. So I started working on a lot of startups. Back then I used to work with PHP, but then I moved to JavaScript. TypeScript wasn't a thing back in Brazil at that time, and neither was Node. Node was, beginning to, crawl their way out of the shadows back then. 2015 was, I think, the year that Brazil knew Node. And I moved to some startups that were already using Node and JavaScript and server and stuff. That's what I wanted to do. And that's basically what I stood like for several years. I've been jumping from startup to startup until I landed in Microsoft in 2018, I think. And then I stood there for like, 2 or almost 3 years, I think, until 2020 during the pandemic, basically. Until 2021. When I left for Klarna, and Klarna is here in Sweden. That's when I basically moved from Brazil to Sweden. It was November 2021. And since then, I've been working, I think, 2 years and something here in Klarna. And then I left in the beginning of this year to another startup. So I kind of like startups. My current company is called OpenVolt. It's an energy related company. And basically, I work as a senior TypeScript developer there, front end, back end. I've done a lot of stuff during these 13 years. I've done infrastructure, I've done back end, I've done front end. I've done cryptography, I've done a lot of security, database. So there wasn't this division, that we had like, oh, today you're just a JavaScript developer, you're just like front end or back end, you did whatever it was there. So basically that was super nice to me, because like I began to know about Kubernetes and cloud native stuff. I wrote a book about Kubernetes, and I create content since 2015. So it's going to be 10 years next year. And I like to kind of learn those things. And that was like, for me, was a turning point. Like being everywhere, like in every scenario, was super important in my career, because mostly I could take one project when we began and took it, like basically drive it to the end, basically alone. That was what we did in the consultancy, right? We had one person per project. So basically we had to do everything. We had to deploy, we had to take care of the database and everything else. So basically that's like a sum of my career in, 3 minutes or so. But that's me.
Cool. Well, I can definitely relate to at least a few things there to where I haven't worked for a larger company. I work for a startup, have for the last 4 or so years. But I personally really enjoy the startup culture, so to speak, of, you're kind of touching every area of the tech stack. Like I started with just a knowledge of JavaScript and React. But now I'm working in Django. I've done just a little bit of Kubernetes stuff. A lot of it just goes right over my head still, because there's definitely a little bit to Kubernetes for sure. And then working with AWS and writing like background cron jobs and all that stuff. So I think with a startup, I guess I can't speak in relation to a large company because I haven't worked for like a very large company. But my impression, at least, is that I wouldn't necessarily gain the experience at a large company of kind of touching all these other areas just because we only have a handful of developers and I just kind of needed to step in and learn it. Is that kind of your impression with that as well? Or how would you, or maybe what do you like about kind of startups compared to kind of the larger company?
Yeah, I think that's kind of precisely what you described. Like, I really like I didn't I back then I didn't know what I wanted. Like if I because I always wanted I always worked in startups and medium companies, right? So I never knew what was to be in a huge company like a corporation like Microsoft. And then I jumped from a company that had like 40, 50 employees to Microsoft with 150,000 employees. So it's like very different. I think they teach you different things. Like, so in those consultancies and startups, what you learn is to be resourceful, right? You learn to be a person that's going to take a task from start to finish, and you have to do whatever you need to do for this to end. And this is the actual moment that we are in here in OpenVolt. So it's a very small startup, like a pre-seed startup, and we are like 7 people, I think. So we do everything. And for me, it's amazing because I like to know the whole scope of this stuff. So like, that's what I like about startups and about the things that first, you need to know how you do everything, and you know everything about the company. Like, you know where the company is heading at, you know what is happening in the company. There's no point in the directors or like CEO, CTO, whatever, hiding things from you or from the employees, because that makes no sense. So we know about the financials, we know about the sales, we know about everything. That makes a lot of sense if you want to, get to know like how we publish a few things. Oh, we need to publish because that's the important thing that we're gonna, sell to a big customer, and that will make us go further, or that will actually make the company live more. So that's the opposite side. Like the bad side is that startups are, sometimes short-lived, sometimes long-lived, depending on the company. So it's always a risk. But in big corporations, the teachings are different. Like, I think what big corporations teach you is to be a team worker. Like you have to be a team player, you have to communicate, you have to be political. That's the part I hate the most about this, like big companies and stuff, especially super huge companies like Microsoft, because for you to get from point A to point B, there is like 50 people in between you and that thing you have to put off. Like, so for example, we had this is a very simple example. We had like there's a Microsoft Learning website. This is still there. To publish one of the courses, that was one of my jobs, like creating these Kubernetes courses. To publish one of them, it took 6 months. And it had to go like to, I don't know, probably 20 people to, review and then translate and do a lot of stuff, because they expect a certain level of quality that you cannot just achieve alone. So you have to, be communicative. You have to know who you're going to talk to. You have to know who owns what. And I was always terrible at this. That's why I don't like a lot working in big corporations. Klarna was way smaller, like 100 times smaller. Klarna had, I think, 6,000 employees. It's still big, but super small comparing to Microsoft. And we still had the same problems. Like, one of the big problems that we had in Klarna, that I had in Klarna specifically, was that in order for you to reach out to, I was developing an app, right? So in order for me to put a component in the screen, I had to talk to 7 different teams. And each one of them owned like one button or one thing in the screen. And that for me, it's something that I cannot stand, because like sometimes the changes are super, super easy to do. And what, blocks you is that the ownership of the stuff. So like the organizational ownership of the stuff. But that's the 2 things I think that the corporations and startups differ a lot, like how they teach you those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I definitely aligned with you, in which, like, for us, I'm basically like our main front end developer. Like we literally have a team of like 6 or 7 developers, and I'm the main guy that works on our front end. So I can just push a PR, get it approved, and it's already in our application code. Like, there is not this huge chain of people that I have to like, get this approved by and stuff like that. It's like, I'm already the main guy. I send a PR to my engineering manager. He approves it. It's into dev. So we're like already good to go there. So I really like that kind of fast paced nature of it. And it sounds like you like that as well. And then one downside of those larger companies is that it kind of has to follow a very certain process and kind of go down the chain of command, which, there's pros and cons to each way. Like having those systems and processes can make it more difficult for maybe bugs or stuff like that to kind of slide in, but it also definitely decreases the like iteration time and stuff like that of getting new stuff out. So
yeah, usually I think the big problem is that I don't mind working in a small team, company. I think that's fine. Like small teams are good. I don't think that we shouldn't have a process or anything. I think processes are important. What I don't like is the political side of the corporations, because you will inevitably come around someone that doesn't do absolutely anything. And it's only there because they know their way around talking to people. So they are political, right? So they go to someone that goes to someone, and then you get the round stuff. And then eventually the real work is never done because they're only talking one side to another. That exists in every organization. Sometimes even in startups, you have these types of people, but they are rare because it's easier for you to pinpoint or to, see when someone is not doing anything, because there's like 10 people, like 12 people. So it's easy to just point out. But if you have like 6,000 people, it's very difficult for you. Like it get lost in the crowd. So there is in every company that I worked for, even when I was in consultancies, I usually went to those, I worked in hospital consultancies. So usually I went to several hospitals, and in hospitals, they don't have like a very structured IT area usually. So the thing is, it works like a big corporation because it is, but with a very like restricted number of people in the IT. So it's like 40 people that works like Microsoft or a Klarna thing. So in order to do something, you have to go like, ask this guy the permission, and then you have to ask the other guy the permission, and then you have the other guy the permission, and then you have to come around because no, that's not in the sprint, and then you have to do change management, and 6 months pass by until you have an approval from someone that eventually will give you your project progress, your project of progress, and you get like your hands are tied, right? So usually what we did is that one consultant back then, he was in charge from like 7-8 different hospitals, because it took so long for us to implement the feature that we wanted in one, that by the time we implemented one, we had like 7 or 6 already like in the end, especially the bigger ones. So that is good from one side because it's like a very slow paced environment. So it allows you to, digest stuff that you're coming in, and learn and do things is not so fast. But the downside is that you don't do anything. Like you need to be very patient, and that's something that I'm really not like. I'm very anxious about stuff.
I'm definitely with you on that. And like you said, some people might prefer that environment of like slower pace and stuff like that. But For me, I would just be like, man, it feels like I've done nothing the last 6 months. Like we need to get stuff moving. So I'm definitely with you on that. So to maybe transition a little bit into some kind of a little bit more technical topics here. So you've been working on the Node.js test runner. So this isn't something that I'm super familiar with. So if you could maybe just kind of go over what this is, and then we can kind of get into, maybe some benefits and different things to kind of know about it. So what is the Node.js test runner?
So let's do an analogy, like for what we have first. Like I've been working in the test runner. Like I did one major PR in the test runner and several discussions, but I plan to actually return to the test runner and be an active contributor now. Just solving things in my life. That's open source. It's very difficult. Open source works like a big corporation, but test runner is imagine that today we use Jest, right? Is the most common test runner that we have in Node. Before that, we had Mocha, we had Ava. What was the other? Now there is VTest. So those are all test runners that you crumble in your application, and then you basically make them run tests in your application, right? So what is a test? A test is a file that's going to run your code, and it's going to either throw or not throw. If it doesn't throw, the test pass. If it throws, the test didn't pass, right? The thing is, there shouldn't be another application, like another library that does this for you. The runtime should provide these things to you because it's already running the code, right? So it should be possible for you to just run the tests with your runtime. So the first one I think that did this in the JavaScript or TypeScript actually environment was Dino. So Dino has this test runner built in, so you can just run the Dino test, and you don't have there is a total of 0 test runners for Dino in libraries. And then Bun and others did this as well. Like I remember that in older languages and other languages that we had, like from before Java, Ruby, they also had their test runners, and specifically in specific packages. But some of them also had native runners or native assertion libraries. So that is what the Node test runner is. It's implementation of the, let's say, Jest inside Node. So you don't have to use them anymore. Because what is the main goal of this, right? Jest, I'm going to talk specifically about Jest here, but this works for every test runner. Jest is old, and it's a very big project. It was created in a time where there wasn't a lot of support for a lot of things that Node already supports. And then you end up with those big Jest configuration files that you have to keep maintaining for 10 years. And you don't know what you're going to change, because if you do change something, the test file, everything breaks, and then you don't know why. And then you have these global environments. You have tests that create state. You have things that shouldn't be there, right? VTest came up to solve a few of these issues. They do solve, but some of them are just insolvable the way they are now, because if you have an external library, you're eventually going to end up with this. So the Node test runner is basically we don't need anything. It's just JavaScript tests, and you just run with Node. And if you want to write it in JavaScript, that's fine. You can just write it, do node --test, and then it's going to run. If you want to write it with TypeScript, it's fine as well. We can just use a loader, what now it's called importer. So like TSX or TS node, you can just do --importer equals TSX, and then --tests is going to run like a normal Node program runs. So that is the gist of it, right? That's the Node test runner. And it's really faster, way faster than, Jest or anything, because what Jest does is that it loads itself into memory, and then it loads all the loaders that it has and all the transformers and everything. And then it hoists a bunch of things to your code up, like mocks before and everything. They change variables, they kind of change your code, and then they run your tests. So Jest is kind of slow, right? For small projects and medium projects, it doesn't make a difference because it is fast enough. But in Klarna, for example, we had 10,000 tests running. It took 30 minutes for tests to run. And 2 minutes were just starting up. So especially the integration ones, those were even worse. But that's the point. That's what we want to do. That's what I want to do. I want to basically make people stop installing external libraries to do tests, like not external libraries to do tests, but to run tests. So I'm not against you installing like a Xenon or I don't know, Chai or any of those assertion libraries that implement more things in the tests. But I am against installing like a runner in the test, because these should be provided by the runtime. So that's what we want to do. Today, the Node test runner is already live. You can use it from Node 20 up. So it's already in LTS and current. The thing is, it's still in development, right? So there's a bunch of things that are not there yet. So we do have mocks for like functions, like common functions, spies and stuff. I added the part that I contributed to was the mocks to the date object and calendars and stuff. Another friend of mine contributed to set timeouts and set up the timers in general. And Colin was the original author. He contributed to a lot of other things, like especially the mocks objects in general. But we don't have like module mocks yet, snapshot testing. Those things are still coming. That's why I really want to raise awareness to this module so people can actually use it.
This is something that ships with like the latest version of Node. So you don't have to like, yarn or npm install Node test runner. It's something that out of the box ships with the latest version of Node, and then you can just use it. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yep, that's it. Import, describe it from Node test. That's it, and you're ready to go.
And I would say that, when I start a project, either whether it's a side project or even in our current professional app, it is a headache to manage the test runner, the configuration files. I'm sure you're familiar with this more than I am probably. So it's definitely a pain in the ass. So doing something like this would definitely be beneficial to just have it out of the box. And, one question that I have is, we use Cypress for doing like integration and component tests. Would you view that as something that is kind of separate from Node.js test runner, since, Cypress does kind of integration tests and, has some features like test replay and running your tests right in the browser and stuff like that? Or like, would your goal someday to be like Node.js test runner handles just literally all of your tests, and you don't need to use something like Cypress or some other sort of like end-to-end test runner or component test runner or something like that?
I think like Cypress in general, like if you were doing render testing, like if you're rendering the components, that's not in the scope. I don't think it should be, actually, because that goes around. It's more things, like it does more things, like it renders, it opens a browser and stuff. So that goes a long way up. But if you're testing React components as functions, let's say React component, I'm assuming that's React, but you can do whatever in whatever. If you, let's say, test React component and you just run that function and then you test the return from that component, like unit testing a React component, that should be available in Node. Because for me, like everything that doesn't generate any rendering or anything that you have to leave Node to actually see what's happening should be integrated in the test runner, like should be feasible in the test runner. Like integration tests are possible in the test runner because integrating tests is basically like you just putting infrastructure along with your own tests, and unit testing is also fully supported. So you can unit test React components. You can even integrate the integration tests in React components or any other sort of component, as long as they support being called as a function.
And how would something like this compare to, say, like React testing library? I know like Ken Dodds, I think, was maybe behind that and did a lot of work with that. So would you see Node test runner as somewhat as replacement to that, or would you say that you could use them both together? As I think I don't currently use it, but React testing library is more so like for assertions and querying alongside your test runner. But how would you kind of compare those two? As I know that's also a kind of popular package to use.
Yeah, no, I think they are complementary. I think in order for you to run like efficiently a test in a React environment, you should have like the test runner, the testing library together, because it's an assertion library. Like I said, like for now, we don't have module mocking, for example, in the Node test runner. So what you can do is that you can extend the functionality of module mocking using Xenon, for example. That's one. And you can, you don't like Node assertion library, which I agree, it's not super intuitive. So if you like Shy or Shoot, you can just use Shy, or you can use like React Test Library, for example. Those make sense. As long as you run them through the test runner, you don't need to do it. Like coverage is something that I would say it's not needed from an external library like NYC, Istanbul. So today, the Node.js test runner also supports coverage. Actually, V8 supports coverage. So you export this as a flag, and you can do, like, I think, experimental test coverage, and then it's going to output for you like a tap, or I think can be tap, JUnit, or dot notation, the reports, and then it's going to work normally. So if you're not running or doing coverage, I think it's super okay for you to have like alongside it.
And I believe you also mentioned that it has out-of-the-box TypeScript support. So is there any extra steps for configuring it for TypeScript, or does it kind of just work out of the box, or how's the TypeScript support work?
No, actually, there's something that a lot of people doesn't know about Node, is that Node already supports TypeScript out of the box. If you want to run TypeScript natively, you can run any TypeScript code with Node if you have a importer. So importers or loaders are not a very new feature. So I think it's been around since Node 16 or 14. But what they do is, like, they're functions that run before the code is imported into the actual runner, like the environment that Chrome runs in, the V8 runs in. So basically what you do is, like, TypeScript is basically JavaScript pre-compiled. So if you want to run TypeScript, basically what you need to do is like compile it, and then you run. Right, so an importer that runs TypeScript, what it does is that it gets the string, which is a TypeScript file, removes everything that's TypeScript, like pre-compile it to JavaScript, and then pass it on to Node so it can run. So if you want to run TypeScript natively, you can just do like node -- importer equals TSX, for example. This is one importer. SWC is another importer. ESBuild is another importer. Babel is another importer. You can do this, and then you pass on your TypeScript file, and it's going to run natively, right? TS Node did this for a long time. So with Jest, what you need to do is that you have to create these transformers that they call. So because Jest runs in their own runtime, their own world. So basically they kind of manage this for you. But Node already supports it, and what the test runner does is just it just activates a new functionality Node that instead of just finishing the program, it's going to instrument your code so you know if tests passed or not. Basically, that's the only thing that it does. And then you can, well, because of that, you can just run with every other flag that Nodes already support. So you can run with env files, you can run it with the TSX support, or like the importers. You can even write your own importer, for example, if you want.
Is there any other kind of new features that are coming soon here for the Node.js test runner? I know you mentioned that, it's still kind of a work in progress a little bit, definitely still trying to work on getting some things coming. Is there any kind of new features coming soon here on the kind of roadmap, or anything else that people should know about the Node.js test runner?
Well, we don't have like, I don't think, I'm not, it's been a while since I've looked in the last issues and stuff. That's what I want to come back. People have been pretty active in the test runner, but I think the next steps are going to be according to what they're doing there. Is going to be like mocks, module mocking, snapshot testing has been something that people have already raised. Some other people have raised the problem of the assertion library. Like they want to move the library to something more close to Shy or to Shoot and Jest and stuff like that. But I think that's going to be the last. But I think the top priority for now is make it more feature complete. So what it's missing, like clearly missing, is mocking. Mocking was one. We had recently in 22, now Node 22, there was the new feature of being able to use globs in the test, so you can filter the test files. Instead, before you only had to, there was a very specific Bash language, like shell script. What is the name of this? Expansion syntax that you could use, which wasn't very helpful. So now it's possible to use globs. Then probably snapshot testing is going to be the next, but we had some problems with it before. Like there were snapshot tests before, but then we had problems with storage and things like this. And then it came out like it lasts for 2 months, something like this. And then now we're trying to figure out like a better solution for that. So I don't think I can help much in there because I haven't been touching point with everybody there for a while. But I plan to actually return more, be more focused on this after I finish my TypeScript course and have a little bit more time to do it. Even during those times, I really want to have, because the code base is not exactly super simple to deal with. So it takes a while. Like this implementation of the date took me 3 months. Actually, the actual implementation took like 3 weeks. But like I said, you have to, send the code, and then they have to comment, and then the whole thing has been like 200 comments in that pull request. So it's 3 months until I actually made it into the code.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, that's very cool. It definitely does sound like that project does have similarities with like a large company and stuff like that, like you mentioned before. And also cool that it sounds like you've got a TypeScript course that you're working on. I know that we discussed beforehand talking about TypeScript. So maybe in our next, maybe I'll have to have you on again once your TypeScript course is finished. And then we can kind of maybe go through a little bit of that and then send people that way if they want to dive in deeper into that sort of thing.
Yeah, so like I've been building this TypeScript course for like, I don't know, 6 months or so. It's in Portuguese, like I've been focusing on the Brazilian community. But I feel like the objective for me, like I really love TypeScript. My history with TypeScript is that I started with Node, JavaScript, and then when I realized that it was super difficult to make big projects scale in Node.js, in plain JavaScript, that was a big problem. So I started like using TypeScript for a while and kind of fell in love with it. And since then, I've never built another project in JavaScript ever since. So I think we actively neglected the learning of TypeScript in JavaScript world. Like we took it like, okay, JavaScript and TypeScript are the same thing. Actually, they're not. So there is a very important difference when you know JavaScript and when you know TypeScript, and when you know JavaScript and TypeScript together. But what happens is usually you fill the code with any's, right? So you have like any as a type. And what it essentially does is that it disables TypeScript. So if you put a lot of any's in your code, it's basically you're doing JavaScript. So there is no point in doing this. And if you're starting that's the most like rookie mistake ever. Like you're starting TypeScript and then you take off your entire JavaScript code base, or you start a new project and then you start putting any's on everything. And there is like, I would say, a certain art of typing things in TypeScript. Like there is a bunch of, TypeScript is actually a Turing complete language. So you can actually do a lot of stuff in the type system. But you have like this certain art of typing things and how you get the correct types, how you extract the correct types and stuff from one place to the other, so you can actually do a strict type checking so your application doesn't air out in production. So my objective with this course is actually to teach people that their applications shouldn't fail, shouldn't crash. So if you do it correctly, you won't ever have a crash in your application ever, like in any case. So that's the goal. Like that's the objective of the course. That's what I like to teach. And it's like I like to create a lot of content around TypeScript because I think people are doing a lot of things just for the sake of doing. Like they're just like, oh, let's put this out in the woods and ship it as fast as we can. But then there is the problem of actually maintaining those things. So in the long run, it's super difficult for, to maintain a huge project. And that's basically what costs more. In big companies, what happens is that you usually have like a big legacy project that no one wants to touch for years. And then that's because they built this in JavaScript and no one knew what was happening in there. And now it's something so big that even though it's in JavaScript, it's impossible to be, to support this, because it's so dynamic that it's impossible to know what's coming next. What's the types that you're that you're receiving? What's the types that you're outputting? What is the objective? The objects that you're actually receiving in one. You're mutating everything, and then the clearest example of this is. I think there's a big example of how these things happen. Like JavaScript started as a super big language that, like with Node, was basically the solution to everything, and people started using it, right? And then Express came out, and then middlewares came out with Express, and then there was the middleware fever. Everything was supposed to be done with middlewares. So in Klarna, we had this project. Super old project from the beginnings of Express. And there were some routes in that project that had like 62 middlewares, 72 middlewares. And there were middlewares that decided if other middlewares should run. And that's not actually how things should work. Like middleware should be consistent across their own things. And I think that's what TypeScript is about. Like now we don't use a lot of middlewares. We just use middlewares if we want to authenticate or change the request in some way. And that's what TypeScript is, basically. Like, you started with JavaScript, and then everyone wanted to use JavaScript for everything. They just started doing like a bunch of changes and changing references and moving objects, putting things everywhere. And then someone came up and said, this is impossible. And then TypeScript came out, and they were like, okay, now let's put order to this. Obviously, it was not the first, but that's the one that actually, got some traction. And since then, I think TypeScript is the future of JavaScript, probably.
Absolutely. And, my preference is definitely TypeScript as well. In my current professional job, we actually just use JavaScript. But every time I do a personal project and I use TypeScript, I'm like, this feels so right. It's just, for me, it makes me understand my code better. It helps me keep things just, to use an arbitrary term, clean throughout my program and everything. So I'm definitely a fan of it. And I also like what you said about how, I feel like TypeScript is almost thought of as like, okay, if you know JavaScript, you can learn TypeScript in a weekend and you don't really need to focus on it and you're just going to be fine. And I know that wasn't my experience with TypeScript. It's like, there's a lot of different things that you could do with TypeScript. Not only just like type annotations, but then you start getting into generics and getting into some of the other kind of powers of TypeScript that just really help you out as a developer. And yeah, it takes some time to learn up front. At least it did for me. But once you do learn it and you get the hang of it, I think it increases your productivity as a programmer when using TypeScript, because I don't write like a stupid bug to where I'm calling a function with a wrong type and then I'm throwing errors and I have to go back and fix it. With TypeScript, you can kind of catch that in your code editor right away and just kind of move forward and progress really well with things. So that's just my 2 cents on TypeScript there. So anything to kind of end with or follow up on there?
Yeah, no, I think it actually adds not only this, but it helps a lot to work in a team. Like, if you're working in a team, you can actually set expectations. I used to say that, I actually say this a lot. TypeScript is a library that sets expectations. So basically, if you're doing something, you can expect a function to receive something and to return something. And if that fails, that's not going to work. So if you're working in a team, one of the biggest problems that we have is like someone did something 5 years ago and no one knows what is that thing that happened and why that thing was
Sometimes
there.
I was the guy that did something 5 years ago and then forget what I did. Yeah.
That happens a lot. Like with me, like I have a project that I didn't touch like for years. And for some reason, people liked it a lot in GitHub and some people were using. and I had to do a bug fix once. And I was like, Jesus, how will I just touch this after 10 years? I haven't seen the project, but it was TypeScript, right? So I could see what I was expecting back then. So with those things, you can actually make your projects last way longer, and it's easier for people to collaborate. So I think like a lot of people say, oh, you should just use JavaScript, or maybe like I think that the worst thing, it's not the worst thing, but something that I profoundly disagree on with well, some people said that TypeScript and JavaScript are really close, so your code base should be as close to JavaScript as possible. That's why people don't use enums, for example. That's one example. But I fiercely disagree on this, because if I wanted my code base to be as close to JavaScript as possible, I would write it in JavaScript, not in TypeScript, right? And I would just use JS docs instead of typing things. So that is not a thing that I agree. I think TypeScript has a lot of other benefits besides the types. It allows you to do things that are not available in the common JavaScript, like decorators, enums, other things that are still being developed, and you can use it actively. So basically, you can have like a future power that JavaScript will eventually have. But JavaScript, basically JavaScript works like a major big company, because things take years to be implemented. So like temporal, for example, like it's the new API for dates in JavaScript. This thing has been around for 7 years, and there's no horizon of it being implemented yet. So like the only runtime that implemented was Dino, and we can hope that some other people are going to do this. But I guess TypeScript goes way beyond the type. It's just you can make things so much better with it. So that's my big point.
Perfect. Well, I think we're up on time here. I actually went a little bit over here, so thank you for staying a little bit longer. But if people want to kind of find you online and follow you, I think that your YouTube channel is mostly in Portuguese, if I'm correct there. But just let people know where they can find you online if they'd be interested in following you.
Yeah, most of my channels are in Portuguese in general, but I will be, starting to, put things more in English and are translating both of them. Unfortunately, videos is not that possible, but in articles and things, I would do it. But Lucas is a very common name, especially in Brazil. So Lucas and Santos are the two most common names that we have. So I basically don't have any nicknames in any social network. So I started using DNSs. So if you want to reach out to me, my domain is lsantos.dev, like Lucas Santos, lsantos.dev. And if you want to reach out to any of the social networks, you just append the name of the social network in front, like twitter.lsantos.dev, github.lsantos.dev, and things like that. And if you're in doubt, you can just go to lsantos.dev. There's going to be everything in there. And I do have a blog where I post almost weekly. I'm focusing most on Portuguese articles right now, but I really wanted to make it multilingual, so we can actually, reach more people. I like to do a lot of articles, not around just TypeScript, but a lot of articles around like how computing works, specifically like RCTs and cryptography and stuff like this. So I usually redo a lot of these old algorithms and just re-implement them. So basically that's how you find me. I'm also on Telegram or LinkedIn or whatever. You can just drop me a message. I will probably respond quite quickly, but I will always respond. It depends on how I am on the day, but usually I will always respond to you. So if you have any doubts or anything, you want to reach out to me or something, just let me know. I will be there.
Perfect. Well, I'll try to get as much of that linked in the description below as possible. And with that, thank you so much for joining me today, Lucas. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. If you have any other time, just let me know. I will be pleased to come here again.